I am joined now by Francis Boyle from his office in Champaign, Illinois. He's a professor of international law at the University of Illinois. Francis, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me on, Joe.
Francis has expertise in many areas, one of them being the U.S.-British extradition treaty. Tell us a little bit about why you have expertise there and how you read the situation with Assange right now in terms of that treaty.
Well, Joe, I led the Irish American community in the opposition to the 1986 U.S.-UK extradition treaty with Maggie Thatcher, and we basically castrated that. So after 9/11/2001, the Brits came back with the old Maggie Thatcher treaty and presented it again in a different environment, obviously, claiming they needed it to fight terrorism. So again, I led the forces of opposition against that treaty by Irish Americans, and we were also joined by the American Civil Liberties Union in both campaigns, because the ACLU understood that this totalitarian treaty could be used against all residents of and others. To make a long story short, because of the change in the political climate after 9/11, I couldn't castrate that treaty, but we did crawl back basic protections of human rights, civil rights, and civil liberties for everyone here in the United States. Regretfully, that is not what happened in Britain. Everyone over there was bamboozled by Tony Blair, the so-called human rights prime minister, and effectively that treaty was enacted into British law without any of these fallback protections. So there we stand. As for now, with respect to Assange, I want to make it very clear, I am not an expert on British extradition law and procedure, and I stand subject to correction by any British lawyer who is an expert on their own extradition and procedures. But my reading is right now, my good faith reading, I could be wrong, Joe, is that on May 2nd, there will be this extradition hearing. I believe Judge Snow will rule that Assange is extraditable. He has already demonstrated his animus against Assange, first saying he's narcissistic. That was completely uncalled for. He's not a psychiatrist. And then second, summarily convicting Assange of skipping bail without giving Assange any opportunity to put on a defense to that charge. So that's pretty outrageous between you and me, but I leave that to the British lawyers to come from that. So I suspect that on May 2, he will rule that Assange is subject to patient. This will be sent to the Home Secretary. I suspect the Home Secretary will order Assange to be to be extradited. At that point, Assange's lawyers then can file a request with the High Court for permission to appeal. And I suspect the High Court will deny that. So Assange at that point will be, I think, put on the next available private jet to the United States of America, unless his lawyers can get a temporary restraining order to prevent his extradition from the European Court of Human Rights. So that as of now, that's my assessment of the situation here from everything I've read so far. But again, my opinion could change, and certainly I do stand subject to correction by British extradition lawyers.
So you are not in league with those who say that this extradition process will necessarily take 1 year or more to play out.
No, not. I think Assange is on the fast track through the British system to get extradited as soon as possible. And the only way this could be delayed is by filing a lawsuit and requesting inner measures of protection at the European Court of Human Rights. Then that would take time, yes. I can't predict how long, maybe a year, maybe two. But as I see it, I think this has been fast-tracked through the Brit system. It's clear Snow in his hostility to Assange at that hearing. That's the Brit attitude towards Assange. Unless the government were to fall and Corbyn were to come to power, and then he could decline extradition. But who knows? Right now, that doesn't look likely either.
Well, let's see. So you're saying his lawyers, Assange's lawyers, need to come armed on May 2nd, ready to appeal to the European Human Rights Court immediately, that day?
No, I'm saying no. I was just teaching the European Court of Human Rights system to my international human rights law students. And the European Court of Human Rights has regulations on this precise matter, encouraging lawyers to file a lawsuit and a request for provisional measures of protection immediately when there is a threat of deportation or extradition that they believe would violate the human rights of their clients. So I think what needs to be done is next week sometime for Assange's lawyers to file a lawsuit with the European Court of Human Rights and then get these provisional measures of protection ordered against the British government from extraditing him. So May 2nd will be too late if they wait too long. Based on prior observation, the filing of that request for provisional measures could take 24 to 48 hours for the court to respond. And by then, I think Assange will be in a private jet to the United States. So I see it, they have to file next week.
Okay, so in advance.
Next week. Yeah.
Can the European Court, reject this request? I mean, it's not automatic, is it?
It's not automatic. No, they'll. In my opinion, they have acted before. There was a case where some Chechens were going to be deported to Russia from Georgia, believe it or not. And their lawyers went immediately to the European Court of Human Rights, got provisional measures of protection, and stopped that deportation. It could have been an extradition. It was a while ago, but I believe it was a deportation. But I think that took 24 to 48 hours. So I don't think Assange is going to have that much time on May 2nd. I think that, with all due respect to his lawyers, I'm not telling them what to do. I'm just telling you what I would do. I would be in the European Court of Human Rights next week and filing a lawsuit and requesting provisional measures of protection in order to the British government that he not be extradited pending the proceedings in the European Court.
So if the process begins in the European Court and it takes a year and the UK actually does leave the European Union, Brexit happens, what happens to his case? It can't be interrupted in that case, can it? if Britain is no longer part of the EU?
Yeah, that'd be extremely complicated question. That if Brexit occurs, of course, right now it doesn't look like Brexit's going to occur anytime soon. You know, we now have till Halloween, trick or treat, to see what happens with Brexit. But I would think that even if Britain pulls out, that would not affect the pending cases and orders. But I don't know. You really have to read the draft Brexit legislation there in the package deal there in Parliament. It's 400 pages long. I haven't read it. So it could have an impact, but I just don't know at this time.
Now, you mentioned Corbyn. In what way could a prime minister determine an extradition case? Can the executive branch there, the prime minister, have that kind of sway over the judiciary in the UK?
Well, it's not technically a sway over the judiciary, but if you read the treaty itself, the Home Secretary makes the decision on extradition. It's that simple. And the Home Secretary right now is reporting to Theresa May, and she's in cahoots on all this. So if Corbyn were to get in there, it would be his Home Secretary, and Corbyn has already stated that
he opposes,
not forward. Now, they did try to do the same thing to us here in the United States with this treaty. They tried to give the decision to the U.S. Secretary of State and knock the U.S. courts out of the process. But we fought back and got that in there, that you get to go to United States federal court first to have a hearing before there's any extradition. But the treaty is clear. The Home Secretary makes that decision.
Not the judge. Okay. So can you explain?
Well, technically, the judge will make the first decision, yes. Right. But I believe Snow, given his animus, dire animus against Assange, will rule that he is extraditable. That goes immediately then to the Home Secretary. And the Home Secretary, he made a statement there in Parliament saying nobody is above the law. So I think the Home Secretary, I heard him, I think, on the BBC, I think he's made it pretty clear that he will order the extradition of Assange as soon as the Judge Snow has ruled he's extraditable on May 2.
Can you explain what the rule of specialty is? Am I saying it correctly?
That's correct. Yeah. Normally in extradition treaties, there is in there what's known as the rule of specialty, which means that if a state extradites someone, the requested state to the requesting state can only prosecute on the grounds for which the extradition was granted. But in this case, in the U.S.-UK extradition treaty, and we pointed this out. I pointed this out to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. The rule of specialty can be waived by the British government in the case of Assange. So if you look at the indictment that is the basis for the extradition request, and also now I had a chance to read the FBI agent's affidavit in support of that indictment that came out on Monday. It's a very narrow, technical, little picayune charge, computer intrusion, that is designed deliberately to strip the extradition request of any political implications, implications of freedom of press, freedom of media, freedom of conscience, freedom of anything, and reduce it to this very narrow, technical, little picayune charge, figuring that they would be able to get Assange on that charge. So once they get Assange over here, however, and we do know there's still at least one grand jury out there investigating Assange and everything related to this, My guess is that second grand jury will, if they have not already, in a secret indictment that's sealed right now, indict him for everything under the sun, and including the kitchen sink. And then at that point, they will go back to Theresa May and say, would you please waive the rule of specialty? And of course, May will say, sure. And that'll be that. I think the other thing, we seriously need to consider here, Pompeo, when he was head of the CIA, called WikiLeaks basically a hostile foreign intelligence service. So are they trying to set the predicate here to ship Assange to Guantanamo and subject him to the Gitmo kangaroo courts down there, where the death penalty is permissible? Other figures have made it clear here in the United States they want to interrogate Assange. Well, he can invoke his Miranda rights when he gets here, but if they ship him down to Guantanamo, all bets are off. We know everyone down there has been tortured and compulsion inflicted upon them, still going on today in violation of basic rules of international law. So this is a very serious threat. And that, too, has to be, in my opinion, the death penalty, Guantanamo, that has to be provided against here, for sure.
Well, however, whatever Pompeo called WikiLeaks, today, William Barr, the Attorney General, the head of the Justice Department in the United States, in his press conference releasing the Mueller report, said, quote, under applicable law, publication of these types of materials would not be criminal unless the publisher also participated in the underlying hacking conspiracy. He's talking about WikiLeaks, and he called it a publisher. Is that significant in this case, in Assange's case?
In fact, it hurts Assange, because I heard that statement, because the indictment itself says that Assange conspired with Chelsea Manning, then known as Bradley Manning, to crack this computer password. So all they're doing there, all Barr is doing there, is doubling down on the indictment, the current public indictment against Assange, that is the basis of the extradition request.
But he's saying he's a publisher, so he should have some kind of protections there, First Amendment. But when we look at the indictment...
Oh, wait, no. Yeah. He said very clearly, unless you're cooperating here and violating the law. And that's what this indictment says. So I didn't detect any thing in there. I mean, he might concede that WikiLeaks is a publisher, but by the one hand, but with the second hand, then he took it away and said, well, de facto, he didn't say it, but he was basically saying Assange conspired with Chelsea Manning to crack this password.
No. I'm talking about what Barr said today. He's saying that WikiLeaks did not conspire illegally with anyone from the Trump team, that there was nothing illegal that WikiLeaks did in that case, and he called it a publisher.
That's the Trump team. That's not Chelsea Manning.
Right, I understand that. But in the indictment, what it essentially says is that Assange was acting like any investigative journalist by trying to hide the identity of his source, that he was not hacking because Chelsea Manning, by the way, had a top secret clearance. She had access to everything. She didn't need Assange to help break in. There was no hacking. It was just about protecting her identity by making it look like someone else had logged on. But she didn't have to hack because she had access. This is what every reporter does. Bob Perry, the founder of Consortium News, said clearly in an article in 2010 that everything Assange did, he did. He encouraged his sources to even break the law if necessary to get the facts that he needed, the documents he needed.
Joe, I agree with you.
Yeah.
If you read the indictment, okay, and the current indictment, and you also read the FBI agent's statement affidavit that was used to support that indictment, basically they've indicted Assange for practicing journalism
right.
and investigative reporting. I agree with that. But they've put it in such a way, such a narrow technical grounds, I think they're going to get him extradited. Sure.
And if he comes to the U.S., you've said on record he will never get a fair trial, even though right now they're indicting him for journalism, as you just said. They're criminalizing journalism. Why won't he be able to get a fair trial here?
Well, first of all, they could ship him to Gitmo. We don't have any guarantees that's not going to happen, especially given Pompeo's statement that WikiLeaks is basically a hostile foreign intelligence service. So they could decide to ship him to Gitmo. We all know those are kangaroo courts. That's clear yesterday in the New York Times. They've been kangaroo courts from the get-go, as I've pointed out. So he's not going to get a fair trial in Gitmo. But even if he ends, if protections are given by, guarantees, the British government asks for a guarantee or the European court demands a guarantee that he be tried in the United States Federal District Court, under the, it will be a railroad and a kangaroo court. Under the Classified Information's Procedure Act, the federal judge will be able to deny Assange access to any classified information. There'll be motions in limine filed to prevent defenses that he thinks are necessary to put on. And he'll be muzzled in federal court, that's for sure. And remember, this is there in the Eastern District, I believe, of Virginia, where the indictment has been brought. Well, that's a rocket docket for so-called terrorism cases. So, I mean, they're going to basically treat Assange as if he were a terrorist and not a journalist.
That's what I was going to ask you. Could they charge him with aiding and abetting terrorism because the information he gave out supposedly helped the enemy in Iraq, for example, and in Afghanistan? They've said this before, I believe. That's what they charged Chelsea with, right?
Joe, I leave it to your imagination. As I said at the beginning of this interview, once they get Assange over here, they could indict him for anything under the sun and the kitchen sink included. Yeah, aiding and abetting terrorism, right.
And on that basis, they could send him to Guantanamo. They would have to have a terrorism charge for Guantanamo, wouldn't they?
They could say that he assisted the Taliban, Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, and therefore, for those grounds, that would give them jurisdiction to ship him to Gitmo. Right. And we know he'll be tortured in Gitmo. We know there'll be a kangaroo court in Gitmo, and he will be subject to the death penalty before a kangaroo court in Gitmo. Right.
And to add all those charges, they would have to ask Britain to waive the rule of specialty. That didn't have to be in the initial indictment for the extradition.
Yeah. Theresa May is in cahoots there with Donald Trump. And, of course, I'm sure right now the British government would be happy to waive anything. Remember, Assange is not a British citizen. He's an Australian citizen. So once he's out of Britain, they could just wash their hands completely of Assange, right? And I don't believe the current Australian government, it's pretty conservative right-wing government, I don't think they're going to go to bat for Assange.
Well, they haven't so far. Francis, thank you very much for your time this morning to talk about the legal situation with Assange.
Sure, Joe. And so, I mean, the bottom line is it's up for all of us to go to bat for Assange, which is why I'm appearing here for a second interview. His basic human rights here are at stake. As of now, I believe his life and physical and mental well-being are at stake. And then the same principles are going to be applied to journalists and investigative reporters. What the U.S. government is trying to do here is set up a de facto Official Secrets Act, which is what they have over in Britain, where the British government is pretty much able to censor anything that from being published in the news that they believe is secret or classified or anything like that. So if they get away with this against Assange, that's pretty much what we're going to have instead of a First Amendment to the United States Constitution. Britain does not have a constitution. They don't have a First Amendment. They have Official Secrets Act, and I think you're a practicing journalist. You know that muzzles. It's not just, but to muzzle the media, Britain, to cover anything that the British government does not want to cover, and then also to prosecute leakers to the news media, which they have done.
And publishers for publishing. Well, we do have Section E of 18793, which is the Espionage Act. And Section E does criminalize mere possession and dissemination of classified information. It's never been used. Nixon impaneled a grand jury in Boston to go after 2 Times reporters on the Pentagon Papers case, but that was withdrawn. And now we see Trump be the first administration to actually cross that red line. And in the indictment, not in the criminal complaint by the FBI, but in the indictment, there is a reference. He's not charged under it, but there is a reference to the Espionage Act, 793 Section C and E. And the James Goodall, who was, of course, the New York Times general counsel during the Pentagon Papers, wrote that the reason that was put in there, he believes, is so that when Britain extradites him based on this indictment, the U.S. could then use the Espionage Act, since it's just mentioned as a fact of the case.
I think you're right about that. I think once they get Assange over here, they will indict him if they have not already indicted him in a sealed indictment for violation of the Espionage Act. And if I remember correctly, Joe, the Rosenbergs were sentenced to death for violating the Espionage Act. So I guess you can draw whatever conclusions you want from that.
Well, yeah, it would have to be in time of war, I think. That's the way I read the act, an execution, and there is Iraq and Afghan wars that were going on. If they wanted to stretch that, they could.
We have the authorization for the use of military force, AUMF, going back to 2001, that authorizes the use of military force against anyone involved in 9/11, 2001, and that would include Al-Qaeda. So, right, they could argue that point if they wanted to pursue a death penalty against Assange. Yeah. I'm not saying they're going to do it, but, you look at these people and the lawyers working there on this, they're pretty totalitarian in their mentality there in the Department of Justice. Sure. Just look at the coverage in the news media against Assange. Just is vindictive across the board, as you can possibly expect. Indeed, even mainstream news media, New York Times, I've read, Wall Street Journal. They're hostile to Assange. They want his head on a platter, and the Department of Justice under Trump and Barr very might well respond. And remember, Attorney General Barr is a CIA agent, okay, and Assange distributed the CIA K6 computer programs on hacking. So the CIA certainly wants Assange's head on a platter. And Barr, all this talk about Barr, he's a lifelong CIA agent that the CIA sheep-dipped at the night law school program at George Washington Law School. So he's going to want to come down as hard as he possibly can on Assange. Sure.
You mentioned the way the Times and the mainstream media treat him. This is really a defining moment, in my opinion. You have to come down on one side or the other finally on this issue, and they are actually undermining their own case as far as press freedom goes if they go along with what the Trump administration is trying to do here, criminalize journalism. But it's more important for them, it seems, to protect the interest of the state against people, against Assange, than even undermining their own press freedoms, which is what they might be doing here by supporting this prosecution.
Yeah, as I said, I think if all this does happen, we will have a de facto Official Secrets Act here in the United States like they do in the UK. That will then be used to muzzle the news media here in the United States, despite the First Amendment to the Constitution. Right, and we'll have a mainstream news media that is even more of a lapdog to the United States government than they are today.
Thank you, Francis, for your time this morning.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Joe, and hang in there.
Bye-bye.
Bye.